Okay, hi everybody. My name is Jennifer Victoria Scarl, and this is my colleague Joshua Young. We're both PhD students at ETH Zurich, and we're co-organizing this amazing event. Just a quick, story how we ended up here. So actually 1 year ago, I was in the US and I met Glenn Weil, and the co-author, one of the co-author and collaborators of the Plurality book project. And he asked me, hey, do you want to participate in this awesome project? And I was like, yeah, sure.
As for me, I was actually in Taiwan when I met Glenn. And Glenn was actually just talking about the book and then asking for contributors. And only after the book was published, we realized that our names were both on the books. And we know each other, and we were just across the street from each other in ETH. And we decided that, hey, this is an amazing opportunity, maybe we should work together. We didn't realize we were working in such similar direction. And we decided that it would be amazing to host an event like this, as Audrey happened to be in Milan, in Italy, over the week. And so we invited her to come over to Zurich.
Yes, perfect. And we are very lucky that we found another co-organizer and our host from Opendata, Florin Hasler. He will do the interview later with Audrey. We are very lucky to have the organization and him to support us. And so first, we will now show a quick video. I don't know if you will see it because it's too light here, but it's basically the trailer. You can also watch it online again later. And then Audrey will do quick inputs, and then Florin will have the interview with Audrey, and at the very end we have a Q&A session.
And we also have a large number of people watching online. And so I encourage people online also to participate and comment on the YouTube live stream. Then we will select 2 questions at the end to interact with Audrey as well.
I think that's it. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Authoritarianism is on the rise.
Global freedom has eroded for the 18th consecutive year.
Audrey Tang, what is your greatest hope for democracy across the globe?
That people see democracy as a social technology, something that people can construct together, that they can improve in the here and now. We can code up political systems.
The Sunflower Movement was a real turning point for Taiwan's democracy.
When the Sunflower Movement happened, I said to my colleague, I have to leave now, democracy needs me. I brought a very long cable for internet connection. I live streamed through Twitter. Everybody saw it is possible for democracy to evolve, to come up with novel policies, simply by asking the people, what should we do together? I was born with a heart defect, and one day, as you sleep, I woke up in a hospital, and they told me the hole in my heart has grown. I could die. This awareness that everything can be reset tomorrow reminds me of Taiwanese democracy. We can lose our democracy just with a couple of missiles.
I think there's a lot that the world can learn from Taiwan. The US is running on a 250-year-old operating system. There is a strong desire to move beyond this and properly rethink from first principles what would democracy in the 21st century actually look like.
We can make the government more open to the public. It will be easier for people to access the data, to analyze it, transparency.
I think it's a great opportunity to make Taiwan
the most exciting constitutional democracy in the world.
I think it's a very critical moment. China really wants to invade Taiwan.
If you're sitting on a place, it is the flashpoint if there's going to be World War III. And yet there's calm in the eye of the hurricane. And that calm, I think, emanates from all that Audrey's done.
We can become co-creators of our democratic system, reconfiguring society in a way that is more transparent, more inclusive, more fair.
All right, welcome everyone, also from my side. For those who don't know me, I'm Florin. I'm the director of Opendata.ch, which is a non-profit advocating for data use in the public interest. I today have the big pleasure of talking to Audrey Tang. As Jennifer has already said, we're going to have an interview style discussion after first quick input by Audrey. But then it's really up to you to ask your questions. So this is really supposed to be an interactive event, basically in the spirit of the book. Yes, I would now give the stage to Audrey Tang. She's, as you probably all know, the first digital minister of Taiwan, and the reason why we are all here today. She wrote, together with Glenn Whale and many contributors, as we heard, the book Plurality, the Future of Collaborative Technology and Democracy. She's given us now a very brief input and overview over the book, and we'll go in depth together in this interview style exchange. Audrey, the stage is yours. Big round of applause.
Thank you. So happy to be here. It's been a little bit more than 2 months since I graduated. I served for almost 8 years as digital minister, and I went to 18 different countries in the span of 2 months. So like 3 day, every 3 day time zone change. But I really loved the opportunity now to interact with people in like full immersive Planck scale reality instead of very small 16:9 screens. The book, as you have heard, is in Plurality.net. That is the website. It is one of the very few books that is completely public domain. Free of copyright, so feel free to take a few chapters and say it's your book. It doesn't really matter. It is completely in the commons, and the reason why we did that was because we want to show that it is not about a kind of author's voice that says what democracy is or what digital democracy is. It is about practicing what the tools we introduce in the book. So the book itself is managed using the tools that we describe in the book, kind of drinking our own champagne. Every time if you see something wrong in the book and so on, you can very quickly fix it. And if two people want to fix it in different ways, for example, we have a Japanese contributor that wants to describe the free software and open source movement in one way, and there's another contributor with the name Richard Stallman who want to write it in a slightly different way. We were just on email yesterday, and then there is this internal conflict resolution mechanism called Git rules. People can vote using quadratic voting based on the credits that they have accumulated in developing the book, and so we will see how RMS feels about that. But anyway, the good thing about this idea is that everybody can just, by participating in the book, understand a little bit more how does it feel to govern a commons, right? Something, a common resource that we share together, and something that can be turned into many different media forms. So you just watched the trailer to a upcoming short documentary. It's 21 minutes long. It's going to like Woodstock or Sundance, Asia, or whatever other festivals it will be screened. But again, all the footages that forms this footage of the short film will be released into public domain full of this co-creational ability. So if you have, like, you're a filmmaker or something, that is also a invitation to remix. There's already a remix called Any Human Power. It's a novel by Amanda Scott, a writer is kind of a novelization of the book Plurality. So it takes the same theme, which is digital democracy and so on, but imagine it in a kind of literal way. The short film is called Good Enough Ancestor. So in Menda Scott's novelization, there's literally a grandma that refuses to pass away when she died, and her good enough ancestor spirit actually guides a teenager to use this new form of digital democracy to transform the world, and that was featured as a character in the novel. So the idea is just to spread this kind of different positive vision of how democracy can evolve along with technology instead of fighting each other in as many different art forms, as many different disciplines as possible, with this full idea of inclusive co-creation, so that anybody who don't feel that we describe things right, you're very much free to contribute and also to fork and also to develop the narratives based on whatever materials that we have in the book. So this is everything I have to say about the book, but that is just the form, right? As for content, I believe this page is full of questions that allows us to talk about content.
Exactly, that's true. And also, just a quick side note, originally Adrian Fichte was supposed to moderate this. Unfortunately, she had a family matter, so she sent her regards, and that's why I'm here. And I have like tons of questions indeed. Audrey already touched on it briefly, but can you maybe elaborate a bit, like why did you write this book and why now?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote the book in the past 2 years. I spent kind of half a day or even entire day every Saturday working on it, because from Monday to Friday I have to work as a minister, you know, and like defending against a lot of cyber attacks and polarization attacks and things like that. But the book really starts from a blog post by Glenn Weil, and the blog post is called Why I Am a Pluralist. The idea is that because there's so many like singularity-ish way of talking about technology, that you sometimes feel like it's inevitable that technology will just take over human agency, take over pluralism, take over everything and so on. And we are tired of just saying no to that or to defend against that or something. We want to develop a new positive vision. And so this new positive vision is born out of what actually had worked in Taiwan over the past 10 years. So for context, 10 years ago, during the Sunflower movement that you saw in the trailer, the trust of citizens to the democratic government was at 9%, so not very high. Anything that the government say, 91% people immediately oppose it. And then 2016, after Tsai Ing-wen, my president, came to power, and in her inauguration speech, she said, you know, before democracy was showdown between two opposing values, but now democracy must become a conversation between many diverse values, a plurality of values. And so that kind of redefines how democracy works. And we started this experiment of institutionalizing all of those digital democracy stuff. And so in 2018, the trust level become higher, like 20, 30, 40, and so on. And so that is what led us to counter the pandemic without a single day of lockdown. And that is how, when we graduated, the entire cabinet and Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, after 8 years, the trust level was well over 60%. And so we want to chronicle how that actually happened, and to dispel the notion that this is something exceptional in Taiwan, that this is not because Taiwanese people started uniformly loving each other or something like that, but it is the result of very careful design and also very careful participatory mechanisms. And so we listed all the mechanisms that work in Taiwan and try to extrapolate it a little bit in light of newer technologies. And so I would say that it starts in Taiwan, but it's not like a Taiwanese book. There's only one chapter. The Yushan chapter is chapter 2 about Taiwan. Everything else, we use the examples from many other countries as well.
Thank you, and we will go into the Taiwanese example later on. But before that, you outlined at the beginning of the book, you outline technology's attack on democracy. You described the anti-social and the centralizing threats on democracy. Could you please elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Sure, of course. Yeah, so if you have played Sid Meier's Civilization 6, the extension of Gathering Storm, there are three ideas in the future kind of era. So one is called synthetic technocracy, basically one giant AGI brain that makes decisions for everybody, right? I see people nodding, so there are civilization fans here, very good. And so that is kind of the dominant narrative that we hear from many people in the Silicon Valley nowadays. And so it is very authoritarian. It basically says that there is an optimum. Maybe it's just local optimum, but let's optimize for that. And so it's premature optimization that forecloses future generations' possibilities. And so, of course, we want to say that that is not the direction we want to go to. But on the other hand, there is also another tendency, which is this idea that everybody is one atom, and we call it libertarianism or corporate libertarianism, sometimes associated with cryptocurrency maximalists, that says, okay, in order to defend against that totalizing vision, let's do a atomistic vision where existing traditions or institutions, they're all destroyed, and we replace that with smart contracts or with some other code and so on. And that is also quite appealing to many people because it gives a sense of agency. But the problem is that it doesn't really scale well to other parts of the society, because for many people, if you don't allow for the intersection of many different groups, like I have a group that I associate with in my hobby A, in my hobby B, and in my ethnicity, in my prayers, in my religiosity, and so on. And it is a fact for most people that they exist in reality of many such intersection groups. But if you subscribe to this very atomistic individualism, then all of that are not captured, right, by these abstractions. And so I think the main introduction in our book is that instead of technology trying to destroy democracy based on those ideologies, instead of democracy looking at those emerging technology and can only regulate it, maybe democracies can invest in newer infrastructures that gives a boost to this kind of collaboration across diversity, making sure that those diverse groups are first-order citizens. And we make many examples in the book about how a kind of plurality-first idea can work in terms of mechanism design, in terms of democracy.
Thank you, Audrey. So let's now dive a bit into the example of Taiwan. You said there's many things Taiwan has in common with other countries, so lessons we can learn from that. High transparency, high trust in democratic institutions, high voter turnout, at this point low polarization. What did Taiwan do right?
I think what we did right was that we see conflict, and then we do not shy away from the conflict. Around 2014, people saw a lot of the Arab Spring and things like that, the retweet button, the share button on social media, and everybody saw that it's very easy to manufacture counter-power on social networks, but it's very difficult to actually manufacture network power. That is to say, it is very easy to take down things and start movements that take down things, but it is very difficult to actually rebuild something on the social media. That is what everybody learned during 2012 to 2014. And so our Occupy movement, that the one you saw, is very rare. It is, I think, one of the very, very few that after 3 weeks of Occupy, peaceful, nonviolent, of our parliament, actually every day we inched closer a little bit to some kind of common understanding that we can all live with. And this is because there's more than 20 NGOs, each deliberating on one aspect of the Cross-Strait Service and Trade Agreement, the trade deal with Beijing, because at the time the parliament was trying to fast-track that through. And people occupy it not to protest, not to just stop it, but to demonstrate. Because to protest is counterpower, to demonstrate is network building power, right? To demonstrate, you have to do a demo to show that if you care about this trade agreement, here is one of the CSO deliberation you can join, and using live streaming, using a lot of facilitation, you can actually capture some of the common understandings of people. So it's not consensus. It's not like people sign their name on it or something, but it's just this general humming, this general feeling of 500,000 people on the street and many more online, converging a little bit more every day. And by the end of the 3 weeks, the Speaker of the House, the Parliament, Wang Jinping, simply said, yeah, it seems like people have got their acts together and have a very coherent demand. How about let's just agree to it, right? So this is one of very rare Occupy that ended with a success, basically having the demands met. But the demand itself was crowdsourced. It was not set on the day one. It is a process of 22 days or something. So in an era where many people think social media only leads to social fragmentation, polarization, we kind of proved that with careful facilitation, you can go the other way as well. And so that, from that point onward, is kind of very different roads with Beijing, because at the same time Xi Jinping is thinking social media is harming the harmony of the society, and so they need to double down on censorship and on taking away journalistic power and things like that. So whereas maybe in 2012 there were kind of more comparable ideas like deliberative democracy and so on across both sides of the street, in 2014 we doubled down on deliberation and on participatory democracy, and Xi Jinping thought that social media too harmful, too dangerous, and decided to crack down on it.
Thank you. We will get into that in a minute, but before that, you also, towards the end of the book, kind of then describe Taiwan as kind of drawing elements from the US, from Europe, and also from China. Could you maybe like elaborate that?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, because facing this common challenge, there are many different ways to address that. So as I mentioned, in Beijing, they basically started heavily investing in the infrastructure of harmony. But that is also a kind of infrastructure, right? They use the state power, they use the state capital and so on. But it did accelerate a sort of their own version, right, of shared digital infrastructure. They also think that broadband is important, leave no one behind, very like going all in on that, except with a very fixed top-down logic. In Europe, of course, we have seen the conversations around not just GDPR, but the Digital Market Act, the Digital Service Act, the AI Act, which currently just started to work, and so on. So it takes a very kind of risk-based approach in making sure that the technological companies cannot operate outside of the guardrails that is set by Brussels and by the EU member states. And that is also good because, in a sense, that it provides this outer parameter in which that people can, when coding things, at least look at the human rights elements without completely ignoring them. And in the US, of course, we see a very different take, entrepreneurial take. The idea is that the state cannot anticipate the repercussions anyway, and so maybe let the entrepreneurs do some of the self-regulation work, and which in some cases doesn't work, but in also some cases we do see some innovations from the charities and from the open source community there that did end up creating some viable alternatives. So there are good elements in all three, and so in the book we simply said that how about let's combine them, how about let's make sure that it is the civil society that sets the agenda, like through presidential hackathons and many mechanisms that we say. So it's a little bit entrepreneurial, but it is always guided by a human rights view, a digital rights view by the state. And then the private sector gets kind of guaranteed investment from the public sector so that it can scale those local ideas into national scale digital infrastructure. So we took the infrastructure idea right from the Beijing. We took the human rights guardrail idea, the scaling of the ethical practices from the EU, and then we take this kind of initial entrepreneurial idea from the US, and we kind of combine them together into a kind of very different social innovation ecosystem.
Thank you. Before we talk more about like digital democracy and participation, I would very interested to hear from you as part of the administration. You were first a minister without portfolio, then the digital minister. Sorry. How does I'm interested to hear like how does like cross-government collaboration work in Taiwan?
Yeah. So So in Taiwan, we have 30 or 31, depending, different ministries, and each ministry has a minister. And when I first joined the cabinet, I made sure that in each and every ministry, there's a team, what we call a participation officers team. So there are dedicated personnel in charge of basically a bidirectional interface with the civil society. And this is mandatory. It's that's not something that the minister can say no. And my office, the Public Digital Innovation Space, the PDIS, basically accepts secondments from each of those ministries. But each ministry can only send at most one person. Although at some point, I think the Foreign Service have people lined up to join, they each must only take turns to join. But the idea is that we make such a space where people who are career public servants join, but they offer one fresh perspective, but they do not dominate the conversation. Nobody dominated the conversation. And so it is more like a horizontal space within the national cabinet that let people experiment with novel ways of governance in a way that is always lower risk and also saves time. Because if you work in the bureaucracy, that's the two things you care about. And if there are ways to save time and reduce risk across all 30 ministries, then it's kind of guaranteed it will work, right? So, because in the very beginning, in 2016, when we first started this system, people generally understand that if you crowdsource, if you do a public engagement, it will lead to signal. It will not just lead to noise. People understand that because we have that experience back in 2014 already, and we spent 2 years proving that. But many public servants were deeply afraid that it will increase risk. For example, if the conflict is too much, then it makes to the news, or that it makes their minister look bad, or things like that. And there's also a public servant that was afraid that this will cost them extra time. And we keep saying, no, there are digital tools you can use that you can moderate asynchronously in parallel, and you can also make sure that there's no reply button, so people don't spend time arguing against each other. You can just do upvote and downvote, and there's more ways to summarize things, and if you don't have that many facilitators, actually the chat room can facilitate itself, and so on. We keep saying that. But if there's no first-hand experience in actually participating in it, they won't take our words for it. So all those participation officers took turn to handle real cases by real petitions. So anyone with 5,000 signature online can start a petition. And after hundreds of such collaboration meetings, they have seen that none of the 100 or more collaboration meetings results in something that explosive. Their minister never lose face. Every time it actually resulted in something useful. And so after the course of, I think, 5 years, they now internalize this logic. And so a lot of the effort that we have done, including the participation officer, the presidential hackathon, and so on, there are now national level regulations. So in a sense, I designed myself out. They don't need me to lead that anymore. They now think, oh, it's a natural part of the bureaucracy. And also it is written into the national curriculum starting in 2019. So there's now a generation of teenagers growing up thinking, oh, that is how democracy works, right? So and that's the best thing. It is not about one big show. It is about institutionalizing it in both basic and lifelong education.
Thank you. You already touched on the presidential hackathons with Taiwan. Could you maybe give us an example on how these participation processes work in practice?
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I didn't immediately become a minister after Sunflower. After Sunflower, I first became a young advisor, a reverse mentor to the cabinet. And at the time, with the G0V collective movement, we're basically a systemic movement that look at the government website, something.gov.tw, and make better shadow versions as something.g0v.tw. So changing an O to a 0 gets you into the open source version that always works better, or at least more participatory. And then if it does work better, then we basically shame the government into merging back our version into the .gov version. And this is a open secret that many of the most popular .g0v projects were started by public servants. And they're like mid-level public servants. They have like 5 layers above them. They know how things should work better, but they cannot make it happen. So they pseudonymously participate of Zero Hackathon, and then they make better versions, and the news journalists discover it, and their director generals are ashamed to maintain it, and so they get a better career as a result. And so it is kind of a safe space, right, for creative bureaucracy. And so one of those experiments we did in 2015 was the use of the system called Polis, POL.is. It is a kind of pro-social social media in which everybody can go in and log in, and at a time we deliberate on, for example, Uber, which was just coming to Taiwan. And on Polis, you can see a wiki survey, so each other's reactions about Uber, you can see whether you like it or you don't like it, and you see your avatar among like 4 clusters. That's Uber drivers, taxi drivers, Uber passengers, other passengers, whatever. And you can see which clusters joint preferences is like what unites them together. And then you, by saying yes or no to fellow citizen sentiments, you see your avatar moving toward one cluster. But the trick here is that because there's no reply or share button, there's no way for trolls to grow. And there's also a scoreboard. So you can also compete kind of internally, like how much resonance you can get from your cluster. And you can also, if you're ambitious, you can compete to take the bridging statements. And so, for example, somebody said, you know, surge pricing is okay because it's less people earn more when demand is higher. But undercutting existing meters is very bad because it hurts the livelihood. So that is something that unites both driver clusters together. And once people enter that, you can literally see those 2 clusters moving closer together. And so using Polis system, after 3 weeks, we did manage to get like 10 crowdsourced agenda that unifies the entire population. And we just read it out to Uber, to taxi drivers, and so on, to the taxi union representatives on a live-streamed multi-stakeholder consultation. And that became the backbone of the new diverse taxi law in Taiwan. And so people saw that using that process during 2014, 15, 16, like 20 laws and regulations can be actually crowdsourced and passed this way. And they're actually much more efficient than the traditional way of having to wait for 4 years to flip-flop against the different options, but rather because it is very high rough consensus, all the different parties actually have no problem passing this. So I think those are the kind of early experiments we did in 2014-15 to kind of prove that there exists a way that is outside of party politics, but still works with the existing parliamentarians, that works like a crowdsourced discovery and definition system for crowdsourced agenda setting.
Thank you. In civic tech circles, there's often like the critique, like if you build a new tool that you just engage the people that would have just engaged anyway with an offline or an analog tool. You also write in the book, it's the committed participants, like the 1% that engaged. How did you manage to engage the unengaged in Taiwan? So and how is this tool different from the other tools?
So we evolved our methodology a lot during the 10 years. So the most recent example was what's called alignment assemblies. Alignment assemblies is this open-ended process in which we want people to share what's most concerning about generative AI in their daily life. Because this horizon scanning requires people sharing their experience. So we ask people, again, using Polis, what do you care about? And then there's a very strong consensus that people care about information integrity online. People were deeply concerned that because now everybody can copy everybody's voice and face and everything like that, it will lead to the kind of crumbling of the fabric of trust online. So we took that particular issue, and because it's a real issue, we want a statistically representative sample of our society. So what we did is that we sent a SMS to 200,000 random numbers in Taiwan. And because in Taiwan, broadband is a human right, so it probably covers everyone, or at least we think. And it's pretty good in terms of return rate, like because the SMS comes from 111. That is the official number. So if you receive an SMS from 111, you know it comes from the government. And then contained within it, again, is this crowdsourced survey. But there's also demographics items as well, so that we know when we choose 500 people from everybody that filed the survey back, we know that in terms of gender or occupation or place they live or whatever other statistical profiles, they're a microcosm of the entire Taiwanese population. So it's a mini public. And then we ask those 500 people to come online on a real-time face-to-face, well, not face-to-face, but okay, video face-to-face deliberation. And to our surprise, I think more than 450 came online. So a very high participation rate, huge participation rate. And they spent almost a day's time. We paid them, of course, some money for their efforts. And they deliberated in rooms of 10 people each. And the beauty of this setup is that in the 45 rooms of 10 people each, there's no human facilitator. As I said, the chat room is the facilitator. So if somebody is too quiet, the room sends a direct message nudging them to speak up. If people disrupt each other, they only allow disruption for 5 seconds. And every time there's a real-time transcription, right? So you can always see a real-time summary of where people are, right? The most divisive points, the most agreed upon points, the most unclear points, and people can in real-time vote to move on to the next topic and so on. And also it enables something that human facilitator cannot do, which is to have a real-time snapshot across all 45 groups using language models. We work with a technology called Talk to the City, which is also open source, that can just ingest a huge amount of semantic data, and then just to visualize them, but also blend them into more nuanced statements. And so we can take like one good idea from this room with another good idea from that room and synthesize it into a very nuanced statement. For example, requiring anyone posting advertisements about anything that's could reach 10% of Taiwanese people to require digital signature for the profile that is shown on the advertisement. And if the social media platform does not secure such publicly verifiable credentials or something like the IDVC or something like that, if they don't have this infrastructure and somebody get conned for $1 million, then that social media platform will be liable for that $1 million. So this is like combination of many different ideas, right? It's like a gatekeeper idea from DSA, there is this share liability idea, there's the idea of decentralized identifiers, many ideas, but then they get combined together and then read out on plenary. And so when people, I think is a good idea, after post-deliberation, 85% or more agree with that idea, then we get very nuanced, almost already legalese spelling of the combined ideas. So there are several such ideas. And so we just put them into our law draft of the Anti-Fraud Act. And just a few weeks ago, it gets ratified by the parliament. It is now a real law. And so like it only took, what, 3 months, 4 months at most, from the initial idea of alignment assembly to the public consultation. And because it is sortition based, so all the 3 parties understand that it really represents the public. Like if you get another 500 people, they will get the same result anyway. And so nobody contests that. And the underlying infrastructure, like Digital Signature Act and so on, there's no contest. It just went through the parliament directly. And so I think this proves that if you add statistical representativeness into the process, it counters the 1% participation very clearly. But that is also only possible post-pandemic, because post-pandemic everybody is quite comfortable with doing this video call. I mean, my grandma probably prefers that over having to physically walk to a town hall. But pre-pandemic, that is not the case.
Thank you. And what would you say, like Switzerland as a direct democratic nation can learn from that? Maybe also in this being complementary to what we already have here?
Yeah, I mean, for all those high-cost layers that in democracy that we also have, we have like real referendums as well. But people use this lighter processes as kind of a training wheel, right? So like before going to referendum, you can afford to start like 10 different smaller processes to kind of explore the solution space before you coalesce on something that people generally think is a good idea. So even the actual people who go all in on referenda, either national or local referenda, they still prefer to try it out on the citizen initiative platform and so on, because it's so inexpensive compared to the actual national referenda process. So I always think these processes are kind of complementary. It is not meant to replace parliamentarian. It's not replacing national referenda. It is just to make sure that when people have a good idea, they can test this good idea on a bunch of other variations without paying a lot of upfront cost in terms of starting a national referendum.
Thank you. Before we open it up in a minute, so make yourself ready, I want to ask another question going more into like open source software maybe. How does the Taiwanese government support the development of open source software, but also the communities behind it?
No, definitely. We have, of course, like many other countries, code.gov.tw that showcases what we call public code, which is not just open source, but means open source coupled with internal policy on how to deploy it in the public sector and the code of conduct around it, right? So we're part of the public code movement, and we also make sure that we allocate such budgets, including code.gov.tw, into what's called the Digital Public Infrastructure budget. You see, the Ministry of Digital Affairs, which is really, really new, it's not even 2 years old. 2 years ago, when we first started, we had a choice of which parliamentary committee to join, and because it's really all-encompassing. We have, for example, the cybersecurity administration. So in a sense, that is what defense, interior, maybe. And we also have the platform economy and the digital transformation section, which sounds more like economy committee, maybe. And then we also have, the more cutting edge research and like satellite connectivity, 6G and things like that, which sounds like science. But at the end, we joined the transportation committee and not the other three obvious committees. And the reason why is that we want to argue that the state's investment into digital commons, into open source, into data fabric, into national models, open source language models or whatever, is in a sense supermodular. Supermodular means that it has its own network effect. It's like a language. If only one person speaks a language, it's a dead language. But as more people speak the same language, its value increases. And so if a digital good has this supermodular attribute, then it makes sense for the government to invest in it, just as we, for example, invest in train stations or things like that, right? Think of airports that only fly one airline. That's insane, right? But if they're for the transportation committee, they understand that this information superhighway must be like general purpose, and so being open source or at least like free from vendor lock-in using interoperable open protocols and open formats and so on. I mean, we invest a lot into open document format, but it is still true that some ministries are using Google Doc, but at least it's always using open document format, so it's not that bad. The idea is to make sure that no vendor can control two adjacent layers of application, because otherwise they switch into a proprietary protocol. So we're not like completely anti-proprietary, but we insist that at any given point you can swap each layer into free software alternatives without incurring damage. So that is the real principle. And so that principle says that what we have invested into it have supermodular effects, and therefore it should be public budgets in the infrastructure pocket. And the good thing about the infrastructure pocket is that, like airports, it only gets more budget. You never cancel an airport project. And also compared to actual superhighway, the information superhighway budget looks very small, and so it's easier for the parliament to pass such budget. If you compare it to scientific experiments, it looks like a lot. If you actually compare it to actual building roads and bridges, it looks very, very small. So I think it was good that we strategically went all in on DPI, digital public infrastructure, so that nowadays even things that were previously not thought of as infrastructure, like as I mentioned, decentralized identifiers, zero knowledge proofs, data fabric, secure multi-party computation, fully homomorphic encryption with the chips that accelerates it, and so on. These were not usually thought of as infrastructure because they were still some researchy in nature. But now, because we're in the transportation committee, it's now all very easy to just say, you know, this is a kind of pilot phase for the next generation infrastructure or something. And I think it really helped the open source and free software movements in Taiwan.
Thank you, Audrey. Since we're already talking about DPIs, what do you think is also looking at programs like the Sovereign Tech Fund in Germany? What do you think is the role of government, or maybe also the role of governments, and how should they foster that?
Yeah, I think that those are very, very good ideas. I mean, if we do not have good continuity in the base layers of the technologies, then we don't actually have free software. We have brittle software that is in theory free, but nobody actually know how to maintain that after like 20 years, right? And so I think this continuity, this intergenerationalness is also part of the vision of public infrastructure, like a bridge, like a highway. You actually have to have the know-how of people's continuous investment into the robustness and the resilience of it. And so in Taiwan, we also pay for like market rate for open source and free software contributors to join the Cybersecurity Institute. And part of the Cybersecurity Institute is to test out the resilience of the systems. And so a little bit like the Sovereign Tech Fund, we look at the more fundamental layers of the stack and test it using red teaming and all sort of like penetration testing, DDoSing and things like that, and to show the kind of drawbacks in the initial architecture, initial design, and then we recommend the best of breed designs that mitigates against such attacks. I think that is also quite fortunate. Like in Taiwan, the cyber attacks is not a imagined scenario. We have the highest volume of all the nations in terms of not just cyber attacks, but also polarization attack and all sort of attacks. And so again, when we say we're investing in the resilience architecture, because our subsea cables can be cut at any given time, it is not an imaginary scenario. Last year, the subsea cable, there's only two connecting Mazu Island and Taiwan Island, were cut in the same week by a cargo vessel and a fishing vessel, both flying the PRC flag. They say they accidentally dropped anchor, accidentally kept moving, accidentally destroy our internet. And so when we say we want to invest in the resilience architecture, when we say that we want to invest in counter DDoS or counter backdooring or things like that, and we need to pay market rates, everybody was like, of course, yeah, we should pay for that. Yeah, so I think that angle is a much better angle compared to simple sovereignty angle, because sovereignty angle is harder to justify in a sense, because after all, most of the users are outside of your jurisdiction anyway. But I think the resilience angle is what allowed us to get even more buy-in, but it's still focusing on the kind of lower layer, like the sovereign tech fund.
Thank you, Audrey. And as you can see, I have a lot more questions, but I do want to open it up to the audience now. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. Please don't take make it too long, because I kind of have to repeat it for the people listening through the stream. Yes, first question.
So you mentioned a lot of learning from experience and sort of iteratively evolving these platforms. Yes. And then you also have your co-author, Glenn Weil, has, I think, more of a formal mechanism design background. So I was wondering how you think about how these two perspectives inform each other.
Yeah, I can repeat it. Yeah. And so the question was about like how much in the book is just documenting experiences, and how much in the book, because of Glenn Weil, is about theorizing, is about mechanism design. I would say that it's very iterative, because, for example, for quadratic funding, quadratic voting, it's not until you actually use it in practice do you start to notice that it has all sort of practical issues, right? The cyber attacks, right? The collusion attacks, all sort of attacks. And then you will have to solve that in order to make things work. So even though that under some abstract condition, it is the optimal voting method, or it is the optimal funding method, in practice we have found, for example, when we apply quadratic funding, it really helps to have a ceiling and a floor, and to have well understood steps instead of just completing that square. Because people can easily imagine this as an award, like we give an award to you successfully mobilizing this crowdfunding campaign. People can mentalize that very easily. But if you just draw a square, then everybody will game the system, and the winner takes almost all of the resources, and the loser doesn't get as much, right? So even though QF is, optimal in some sense, in real world, in order to convince real people, we have to do a lot of adaptations. And so then once that is done, then Glenn goes back and theorize it some more. Like, because of collusion, we now conceptualize this as a bridging bonus. You have to first show that you belong to different social groups in order to earn this new bridging bonus across distance and so on. So basically, based on our ad hoc changes, he will theorize more and into a much more coherent design. And then we try that new design and then find some new problem with it. And then he theorizes more. So I think there is a very healthy back and forth going on.
Yes.
Hi. So my question is, what do you imagine are methods for a country like India, where digital literacy is not very high, but the digital use is very, very high?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by literacy? Like knowing how to operate computers and phones, or?
More like social
awareness.
How do you say, use of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, people use it a lot. Like people use social media and different things, but not everybody kind of. I mean, people how do you say, like, use services rather than actually kind of
create services.
Not even just create, but also like question or think. I mean, I don't
think critically. Okay.
It's a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So the question was that in India, like while people do use like instant messaging or social media or some other applications, it's harder to imagine, like to configure them in some other way, in a way that is more like self-organizing, that is pro-democracy, like what we just demonstrated. It's more like consumer, being consumer of technology. Is that right?
Yes, that is the question. And how do we somehow, do you have any thoughts or ideas on how in such a large population of also now really huge digital use, to bring about some of this kind of
politicized people?
No, people are quite politicized. We have really high voter, but people just know one person, one vote, and this idea is really strong. But this kind of digital democracy as a technology, I mean, this is really not still within the social fabric of people. And what kind of what are some ideas that would be? A
really good question. The question was more about then how to make people excited about applying such digital technologies to come to decisions together, or to come to manage common resources, or things like that, instead of purely as consumers of entertainment or things like that, how to make sure that they are producers of meaning or producers of decisions or things like that. Now, this is a great question. In Taiwan, we have found consistently that that a young mind, like 9 years old, 10 years old, is the best start. Like when the 10 years olds start to measure the air quality using their primary school's balcony or something like that, and have a real impact in whether their parents go hiking or something that weekend because of the air measurement they did. There's a lot more agency that is brought by those 10 years olds. And when they turn like 12 years old, maybe, they can fact check as part of their civics class the presidential candidates as they're having a debate or something, and have their name on TV if they find something wrong or something. And so, or participate in a collaborative fact-checking mechanism, Cofax.org, which is a Taiwanese like wiki crowdsourced fact-checking, and that is also popular in Thailand. And so when they found that, oh, they can can also help to dispel some rumors or things like that. They feel a lot of agency. When they turn like 15, they can start a citizens initiative saying that research shows that high school students, if they sleep 1 more hour, they actually score better than if they study 1 more hour. And so instead of going to school in 7:30, they petitioned that they go to school on 9 a.m. or something. And they got what they want. Now they go to school, I think, 8:45 or something. So anyway, I mean, even before they turn 18, a series of successful agency experiences brought them into the mind of citizenship instead of consumers. And when they turn that back to the family and ask their parents, their grandparents to join, it is much more convincing than a minister telling the grandparents to join. That never works. And so I think really we need to focus on the basic education level. That is very, very important. And also the earlier that you can involve them, because they're full of imaginations, into setting the agenda, not necessarily for the nation, but just for the local people, for the local community, the better. And I think there's many civics teachers, there's many teachers that really want their students to develop this kind of competencies, and their students have the appetite for it. So all we need to do is to find the kind of decision-making points of intervention that can admit this kind of participation by the young people. So I think this is quite important. And if there are currently frustrations because of, for example, the young people don't know the language of bureaucracy, or that they speak an entirely different language altogether, or things like that. There's also nowadays many uses of language models and so on that can help to bridge that gap, so that even just by recording a voice message alone, they can extrapolate it into something that is more convincing, or something that's more useful, something that's more mobilizing, and so on. So there's a lot of chatbot-related experiments, I think, especially in India with so many languages. And so I think that is also an area that we can invest more on. So all in all, I think starting small and starting when people are small, that has been the winning formula in Taiwan at least, and hopefully in India as well.
Talking of using your approach for other countries, I know China quite well, and I believe it's quite a challenge, whether they want or not, like to go more towards democracy. Also, I believe that the bigger middle class will eventually lead to that. I also believe the government is aware of that. So would you have a recommendation using your approach? I'm listening to you, by the way. Funny enough, I see parts of what you use could be used in China as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the question was that, so as I mentioned, in 2010, 2012, there are many cities within the PRC that are already trying out this kind of what they call 协商式民主, 商谈式民主, deliberative democracy, essentially. Or later they're going to rebrand that into kind of all-process democracy, or whatever they call it, right? At least it's not democratic centralism. Anyway, so the point is that there's a lot of interest in that around those times, 2010 or so, and I was also invited to share a cross-video conference and so on with many groups. And it is quite, so to your question, like how much of this is applicable to those smaller, maybe, jurisdictions that have a lot more middle class than it had 10 years before. I would say that they're very applicable. There's like these very low friction tools like quadratic voting and things like that that can just work there. The problem now is mostly that because to do deliberation you need an informed citizenry. And to have an informed citizenry, you kind of have to have journalistic freedom, investigative reporting, and things like that. And that is where they're currently running into a wall, so to speak, for many social issues. But I mean, we're not a stranger to that as well. Taiwan had 40 years of martial law. I was born into the martial law. When I was born, there was no freedom of the press. There was no freedom to form new parties. And what people did is that they found topics that are not that threatening to the dictatorship, so environmental protection or consumer co-ops or things like that. And then they started, or education, pedagogical stuff, or spirituality, disaster relief and recovery, and so on. So these are kind of the topics that doesn't directly challenge the dictator. And so that is what allowed the Taiwanese civil society to grow and enjoy higher legitimacy. And so, yeah, I would say that in any authoritarian setting, not just the ones that you ask, you probably have to go around a little bit and to try these methods in the civil society corner of the world before it turns into something that can, for example, run a city council.
Hi. A few days ago, I read news that Apple is introducing to use homomorphic encryption. You also mentioned it. Simple question: does Taiwan already use homomorphic encryption, and what are the use cases of the platforms they're using?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a guideline of privacy-enhancing technologies that shows very clearly, like, when to use multi-party computation, when to use differential privacy, and when to use fully homomorphic encryption, and so on. There's also reference implementations, some toolkits, and so on for that. So for FHE, currently, I think it is still only used in a few pilots, in which that you absolutely must keep the raw data in the same place, that it must not move to other places, and also you don't really trust a trusted execution environment. And so the actual conditions that fits this FHE based settings are not that many. There's some pilots, and if I remember correctly, that the National Center for High-Speed Computation did with like sensitive materials when it concerns to biobank or something like those bio-related measurements and things like that, or DNA-related stuff, and so that you can do some research, some computation, kind of in an encrypted form to some other data center, but you don't want that data center that provides the compute to learn anything about your data. So you encrypt it, send it for computation, get it back, and then decrypt it. And so there are some pilots that seems to work this way, but I don't think there's currently large-scale use. The large-scale use will have to wait until the public infrastructure budget gets passed later this year. That will then establish what we call data fabric among all those different data silos and allow them to be linked together. And then we can determine which parts that needs FHE the most, and then start investing really in either the accelerator chips or whatever the computation requirement needed and energy requirement needed for those FHE computations. So if you're interested, the entire data fabric public budget will probably be announced in a few months, but at this moment I think we're still in the place of pilots.
Thanks for being here, Audrey. I have a question. Like, if we would ask a Swiss politician, I really think that if they would, like, if you would ask them what is digital democracy for them, they would, like, say something about digitizing the administrative sector. And I think in this area we can see that digital technology can also lead to a lot of harms if you think of like algorithmic decision making. So I was wondering if you have any like visions of technological artifacts that embody pluralism for the administrative sector.
So the question was about the use of digital technology within the administration, and you mentioned harms like automated decision or things like that. Okay, yeah. So whatever. Okay, yeah. So the question was about in the administrative setting, can we embed the idea of institutional pluralism or plurality into those administrative procedures, right? Okay. Yeah, that's a good philosophical question. Yeah, I think in Taiwan, what we have always done is that we make sure that the civil society, when they come up with better alternatives on how administrative artifacts can be constructed, there's a very direct line coming from the civil society through the presidential hackathon, or through one of those sandboxes, or through one of those citizens initiatives, or one of those participatory DPI events, for those artifacts to very quickly flow back to the administration. I think this import part is often missing, because there is a lot of prestige to be done by saying, oh, I developed something, I open source it, the world can now use it, right? There's a lot of prestige. But there's less prestige in saying that, oh, somebody discovered something here and then we import it into the administration. It doesn't sound very exciting, right? You don't hold a press release for it. But as I mentioned, to have in the public sector a generation now of public servants that already consider it not risky to import such innovations from the civil society. I think that is by itself very pluralistic, because then they're not confined to the thinking of procurement. Because if it's procurement, there's only one winner of a tender. And you have to do the RFP process like very early on. And even though you have maybe a participatory collaborative scenario workshop design RFP process, at the end of the day, only one winner wins the tender. But in all the mechanisms that I just described, there's multiple winners. In the quadratic funding, for example, for one common challenge, there can be 5 different winners, and then you take the best idea from them, and then you start a public infrastructure that can run those 5 applications. And that is a very different thinking from procurement-based thinking. And so, yeah, I would encourage the public sector to think more in terms of awards, more in terms of collaborative grants or things like that, instead of procurements. That's my #1 suggestion.
I think there's just a segue into that. So you said now that we have a generation of public servants who don't see it as risky. We don't have that yet. So how do we convince public servants to take that risk for the first time?
Yeah. So the question was that how back in 2014, when all the public servants was so scared that if they don't respond well to the next citizens' demands, their ministry may get occupied. So like very low trust at that point. Like how do we instill the trust in them so that they're willing to trust the citizens more? Basically, that's the question. I think really there's 2 things, right? There's expectation management. You really need to show them that you're here not to prescribe or to order or to coerce or to somehow mold the public servant into any particular direction. So I very famously said that I works by giving no orders and taking no orders, right? In a kind of very Taoist or anarchistic, however you want to call it, way, right? But that must be proven again and again, that I never attend any political party rallies, that I never endorsed any political parties, any candidate, that I'm working in a purely procedural layer, that I am kind of more like a senior bureaucrat than a politician, basically. And so, and if you keep doing this, then the public servants really see that that is your value. And so this alignment, this internal alignment of the public services insistence on leaving no one behind, on the infrastructural thinking, common good thinking, and so on. If you keep doing it in small enough steps for hundreds and hundreds of different collaborative meetings, then the public service learns that this is your true value, and so after like 3 years, 4 years, they start internalizing that. So this is the first answer. The second answer is somewhat peculiar to my style, because if you go to sayit.archive.tw, you can see literally 2,000 meeting transcripts, and each journalist visit, each lobbyist visit, even some internal meetings that I chair, you can find entire transcripts of what everybody said on those meetings. And the reason why is that radical transparency makes it easy for the public servants who are not involved in my projects to learn my kind of thinking, right? So they have a kind of mental model of me, and they can see what the minister sees, and also they can see the how and why of policy making, not just the result, which is the policies. And as an additional benefit, now all the pre-trained language models like Llama or whatever, they know exactly how Audrey Tang thinks, because it's all free of copyright, Creative Commons 0. So it's all in the pre-training material of all the language models. So I have digital doubles for free. But anyway, so the point I'm making is that first you need to get into this credible neutrality logic. And then you have to find some way, and radical transparency is just one of the ways, to make it really well known that you're aiming for credible neutrality instead of anything else.
So you said that essentially these systems are not intended to replace traditional democracy. But I was wondering if you could say something about how the traditional parties or other agents in Taiwan sort of responded to this, and how they changed their operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is that, okay, obviously Taiwan still have political parties. We have 3 major ones, and none of which have over 50% in our parliament. And so obviously this doesn't eradicate political parties. Rather, it's an augmenting function. But the question was that, so how did the political parties change internally in their logic because of this a decade of transparency, basically? Quite a few things. First, they kind of raised to the top when it comes to citizen engagement, when it comes to commitment to the open parliament agreement, partnership, part of OGP. So all 3 parties in their platform now place very high the idea of direct citizen engagement, consultations, participation, whatever. Because in 2014 already, if you're a mayoral candidate and your platform doesn't include those open governments, crowdsourcing, and things like that, you lose the election immediately. And so people already learned that this is kind of like a basic requirement. Now, of course, some cities in 2014 are more advanced than the others, like the Taipei city with its participatory budget, and the Tainan city with its direct mayoral consultations and so on. By the way, they both, the 2 mayors at 2014 were presidential candidates this January, and the Tainan city guy won. He is now our president, William Lai. And so they kind of compete how open they can be in running their cities and in establishing their presidential ticket, basically. So this is a race to the top. And the other is that also it tends to depolarize a lot of conversations, because if the legal draft, the bill, when it reaches the parliament, already have rough consensus among the people, then the parties tend to contribute mostly by making it more coherent with the rest of the legal body, the other laws, or they introduce something that partly is of their party value, but as a kind of parameter change instead of structure change of the draft. So that both makes the parliamentary process more speedy, as in like there's less hurdles to go ideological flip-flopping, and also it means that we get to focus more on the body, on the merit of the suggestions instead of on the ideological debate, because the citizen initiative and so on and civil society largely already signaled that ideological common ground, so to speak. So a way to discover ideological common ground, I think, is what contributes to the very low polarization in Taiwan in terms of rural-urban, in terms of ethnic, in terms of religion. Taiwan's polarization is now lowest in the world when it comes to developed countries.
You were talking quickly about the referendum in Switzerland, right? And it's costly. We actually have a process also for public consultations on the national and federal level. So it's pretty cool. It's just doesn't work very well so far. Okay. we're on it, we're trying to digitize it, and the procurement logic here is quite a barrier. Because it's on a federal level, there are a lot of players who, basically earn money. And you mentioned shaming as a mechanism too, we call it education. Yeah, similar logic. Do you have maybe, some best practices that you could share to accelerate a process like this? Trying to move from something that's, closed source and tender-based to an open infrastructure model.
Yeah. Okay, so the question was, so first, thank you that I learned something, that you're trying to digitalize your consultation process. It's very good. And the question was, what are the ways that we narrate the shift from open source as a, cost-saving measure or whatever, into, no, it's actually part of the public infrastructure, and therefore a worthy investment into the resilience of the fabric of our everyday life, right? Of the essential fundamentals. And proprietary software, instead of, having a commercial guarantee, is instead seen as something that may lead to a monoculture, and therefore a security hazard, because if you have many different layers all belonging to a proprietary software company, then they don't use interoperable protocol, you cannot audit it, and it all gets upgraded at the same time, and then cross-track happens. Anyway, so the idea is that to see it as a brittleness, right, as a fragility. And so, yeah, I think the language of resilience here really helps. Because if you start by doing cost-effect analysis, then there's infinite ways that proprietary companies can distort that cost-benefit analysis. We all know it very well. But if you say that by choosing, like in Taiwan, we have 3 different vendors when it comes to non-geostationary orbit satellites. And the reason why is that we look at the Ukraine situation and say that if we put all our eggs into one basket, then one person can shut down the Starlink at any given time and declare that it doesn't work in the service area. So we need a plurality of suppliers. And the same logic goes to all the different levels of our infrastructure building. Not because we don't trust these vendors, but rather we have this assuming breach mentality, saying that no matter how good it is, it's probably breached at some point in time, and it's only a matter of whether the attacker activates, right, the breach. And if you ensure that in each layer, it's downstream and it's upstream, those layers belong to different vendors or are free software, then when the attacker tries to move, then it's stopped and detected, and the threat monitoring can mitigate the attack. But if it is a monoculture, then they can laterally move however they want, right? So this argument is a very strong argument because it argues from an information theoretic cybersecurity way. It doesn't argue from a cost-effective analysis way, so that we all know that the initial upfront cost will be higher, and especially if you want to run a full audit of a software bill of material, of free software that have not been run like this before, then it's actually very costly. But then we say this is the price we pay for resilience, basically. And so that logic, I think, does convince people. But I think at the end of the day, you just need to show that previously there's this volume of attack, but switching to this new infrastructure, most of those attacks just are gone, right? As we have shown in this election, even though there's this huge number of DDoS attacks, I think many, like 33 times more quarter over the previous quarter, but the actual incidents lowered by 22% because we switched to a more resilient infrastructure. So citing numbers like that from Taiwan may also help Switzerland to change its procurement strategy.
Yes, thank you. So we also have a couple of questions from the live stream. Josh, do you want to read one out?
Yes, the first one is, given that deliberative results are often ignored by politics, how can we prevent selective implementation by politicians?
And the question is it a good idea to link AI-supported online deliberation drafts directly to public referendum initiated by the people?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think selective implementation is mostly, in my experience, because the deliberation results were not fully contextualized within the kind of urgency that is set by the society. That is to say, if the entire society think information integrity is in real danger, if the entire society think that fraud prevention is the most immediate thing to do, or whatever, right? So if there's a clear urgency and that is recognized by the population, then it is very rare that a minister or a legislator or a party leader will come out and say, oh, actually, I don't think that's that bad. Right? It's not possible. So I think there's the need for an outside game. There needs to be a kind of popular movement already, awareness campaign, if you will, that says whatever we're deliberating is one of the most urgent thing or one of the most significant thing in our current horizon. And if you have that, then there's less risk of selective implementation, because people who selectively implement will have to bear the political cost of ignoring what is evidently a very urgent situation. On the other hand, linking it to referenda, I think it's maybe worth doing it even before the referendum topic is written. Like maybe the referendum topic itself can be the result of such a AI-assisted deliberation, if only because we can try many of them now at the same time. The cost is now very, very low. It used to be the bottleneck was you need to have this many trained facilitators, this many trained people who summarize, this many people from think tank to kind of contextualize it back and things like that. But now, because you can more or less use language model for all of these functions, especially the summarizing part. So there's currently there's someone named Ano-san in Japan who recently used the same AI stack for deliberation, but to run for the Tokyo governor election. And so he got the highest vote of anyone under 40 years old in that position ever. He didn't win, by the way, but he did make sure that anybody can call the AI Ano and just speak their mind and ask questions about the platform and make suggestions, or to using social media with hashtag Tokyo AI to add to the platform. And when there's kind of new bridging statement that happens on GitHub, a successful pull request that changes the platform, the VTuber version of Ano-san automatically re-record his platform video to reflect this updated platform. So this is a very automated cycle, and he only has a very small staff, right? So basically, this is kind of proof of concept that says you can form a coherent platform, which is, by the way, independently ranked as the best platform, right? So the second best is Koike-san's platform. She won the election for the third term, but even Koike-san thinks Ano-san's method is very inspiring, right? So now we're at the point where you can, with a very small staff, make very coherent platforms in a kind of self-organized, iterative fashion. And so to apply that, if not for a governor's platform, if to a set of referenda platform, it is not unimaginable. So yeah, I encourage you to look to those examples and see how much more variations you can do in all parts of the political process.
I'm wondering, or I assume that one big hurdle to move towards a plurality-based society or democracy is to handle the people who are currently in power and have a lot of control. I assume it's not in their interest to move to make the transformation. How do you handle that, or what is your experience of it? Do you even handle it, or do you just give them no attention and it just happens with everything else?
Well, I mean, people who are currently in power, they still have to respond somehow to the next election, right, to the people's vote, because they could be voted out. And that is exactly what happened in 2014. People who did not respond to this plurality idea of crowdsourced agenda and so on, even though they thought they would continue to serve as mayors, they lost the election. So I think that is the real check and balance, which is to ensure that the population generally know that there's some like very basic, very simple things that politicians can do as a start. And then any politician that want to retain their power must then do these very basic things. Like in Taiwan, the very basic things in 2014 were, just opening up the structural data, making sure that the citizens can fully audit the decisions, not declare their campaign donations in a real time or at least a kind of fully auditable way to ensure that the deliberations in the parliament across parties must be live streamed and things like that. So these become kind of like baseline demands. And then the people who did not fulfill those baseline demands simply don't get elected. And so again, this is relying on an outside game of popular awareness. I don't know any other way to change the people in power other than just change the citizens' expectation of how power behaves.
I would like to ask you something from a view of a public servant. Because we also heard, like, in Switzerland there are no public servants already. I would confront that view that you expressed that are innovative or open to participatory things. I would like to ask you, can you say something about the career of a public servant in Taiwan? How does that look like? Are these mostly people starting 25 and then getting retired with 65? Yes. Are they like, is there a lot of fluctuation in between departments? What are the factors that people get promoted to then like have more power in public service? I would like
that's a great question.
Yeah, the question was about the life cycle of public servants in Taiwan, right? So yeah, so Taiwan places a very high standard in the written capability of public service. So a lot of people who enter public servants by passing examinations. We are so doubling down on this that our constitution actually have a separate branch called the examination branch that is separate from the administration, legislation, and the courts, just to ensure that the public servants pass their examination. And the examination are designed well. And the great thing about that is that once they pass this basic competence in examination, they're basically guaranteed to stay in the system. And so they do get, of course, promoted or go into some other ministries or get promoted from the local to the central government and so on. But mostly they earn these by merit, by making sure that they contribute to important projects. And once they contribute to important projects, they get this kind of gold stars or something like that. And with enough of that, they get promoted very quickly. And so when we design presidential hackathon, participation officers, or even our internal democracy system within the ministry and so on, we always make sure that the more engagement you do, the easier for you to get those recognition, those gold stars and so on. And we give them out like very liberally, like the more risk you take in reaching out to across even wider distance, the easier for you to accumulate those gold stars. And we also do it almost as a structural way, like you can, as a public servant, participate in the presidential hackathon using paid time. So it's not considered a vacation or absence if you participate in those. And if your team wins, then you actually get those gold stars in a lot. And so for many public servants, their participation in the civic tech, in the presidential hackathon, in other activities, they're kind of on-job training in their own thinking. And there's virtually no risk, because if the idea doesn't work, they can say, you know, it's the civil society's ideas. I was just, you know, collaborating with them. But if it does work, then of course that's my idea, right? So then get a credit. And so I think you need a lot of this incentive design in order to make public servants feel that the civil society actors, the civic hackers, and so on are the natural allies for them. And you also need for those civic hackers who want to help them in a kind of full-time basis to join like the Cybersecurity Institute and pay them market rate. Like these two are both needed, and like yin and yang, you cannot have a public servant that just outsource everything to the civic hackers, but you still cannot have civic hackers that must then still work a full-time job at the side just to contribute to open source in the public sector. You have to have both.
I think we have time for yeah, maybe 2 more questions. You were already had a turn, so if you have more time, we can still get back to you. But Joy.
Yes, of course. So a couple of years ago in Switzerland, we took a decision to reject a proposed CO2 law. We have taken many bad decisions with public referenda in our history, many of which actually contradict human rights. And so since that decision about the CO2 law, we've sort of, or I sort of feel like we have been held hostage by that decision, because time and time again politicians refuse to take courageous climate action by arguing that it was rejected by the people. So now they have decided to do a much less, like that law was already not very courageous to begin with, but now they have taken a less courageous path on top of that. So my question is, how do we increase the amount of public participation without this happening, and how can we still hold politicians accountable for taking courageous decisions despite previous bad decisions by the public?
Yeah, so the question was, I'm not intimately familiar with that law, but it sounds like a referenda of a kind of climate crisis mitigation law that was not adopted by the referendum. And then it became kind of a citation, so that anytime people want to push for more radical or more encouraged climate mitigation action, the politicians can always say, but even that mild version was rejected by the people, so I cannot work against the will of the people. But that was the question. Yeah, in Taiwan, we also had some of that in 2018, because at the time, the Constitutional Court already ruled that the existing civil law that prohibits same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, and that if the legislators do not find some way to make sure that the same-sex couples enjoy the same rights and duties, then the civil law will automatically extend to same-sex marriage in a number of years. So that's the Constitutional Court ruling. And then in the referenda, there's exactly that, which is to say to amend civil law to allow same-sex marriage. But that was shut down. that referendum did not pass. And so then it became very tricky, right? Because if you're a legislator, you're basically, your future is on the line. If you say you support same-sex marriage, if you say same-sex couples form a marriage, then that puts you against more than 50% of the population. So nobody would like to say that anymore. But I think in Taiwan we did something very creative. We redefined really same-sex wedding. So when two individuals wed of the same sex, they enjoy the same rights and duties, but their families don't. Because in Mandarin, that's two different words. Between two families, it's called yin, and then between two persons, it's called hun, right? So it's two different words. There's Taiwanese here who can attest that for me. Right? So 结婚 and 结姻 are different things. And so in our same-sex wedding act, well, we don't call it the wedding act even. We call it the implementation act of the Judicial Yuan interpretation ruling number XYZ. Right? So that's the name of the act. And so that act defines same-sex people to wed and then it hyperlinks to all the parts of civil code, but without mentioning that it's part of the civil code, so it's not part of civil code. And it doesn't hyperlink to the kinship part. So strictly speaking, actually, this is a superior form of marriage because you don't have the same duty of support to each other's extended families, and the conflict of interest area is lower, and so on, right? So it makes it superior, I guess. But then that's how we passed marriage equality and become the first in Asia to do so. But to do that is also a form of plurality, because instead of just fighting the same binary opposition, we created a bridge. And that bridge, in a sense, allowed part of the old people here and old people here to cross the bridge together. But it also left some people behind that didn't want to cross the bridge, right? Because there's also people who say, you know, to do that, it is discrimination. And there's also people who are angry even when two individuals wed without the families, right? So it created unlikely alliances out of people who were previously enemies. And it created unlikely enemies out of people who were originally on the same side. So it disrupted the two sides of the referendum and shake it up completely, so that it become re-splintered into 4 groups. And once you do that, you can open the same political conversation, but without using the same words again. And so you become not bound by the referenda, because now we're talking about something else entirely. So I think you do need some sort of creative thinking like that, like not mentioning CO2 or something, I don't really know, but achieving the same effect and just turn it 90 degrees sideways.
Thank you. Before we conclude, I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
So my question is, well, for what kind of initial themes, because whenever you speak and a lot of people speak, you're saying we, right? And I understand that it also comes from like a social movement, like the Sunflower Movement, where you form alliances. But what would be an idea for like an initial team of people to kind of even sit together, to have a conversation which can even come up with both humanitarian and creative ideas at the same time, in a sense? Yeah. What kind of teams?
Right, so, yeah, so the question was, who is this we? Like, when we say we in the GovZero forked governmental websites, when we say we initiated this project or that project, like, how is this initial we chosen, right? Or how is this initial we discover each other? Is that the question?
Yes. Yes, but also, like, when people have the same desire, but who can be, because in a democracy, we is everybody.
Yeah.
But there's always also an initial we, which somehow makes these ideas manifest to a larger we, and then to a larger we, and then in this way. So who, like, in a sense, would be a good, like, different, what I need to ask is which different fields do you use?
Okay,
yeah.
the composition of participants.
Participants.
Okay, yes. In GovZero, there's this saying, do not ask why nobody is making things happening. You are that nobody. And so I think it's a very powerful slogan. It basically says that anyone who feels that there is a need, that person is the initial person, is the initial we. And the role of a community is just to make sure that there is a safe space and also a recurring space that you can always go back to, right? So in GovZero, there's this bi-monthly hackathon that has been running for more than 10 years now, for 12 years now. So people know that every other month, you can go back to the same place with very good food, with the pitch you're going to hear from the various projects. There's open space technology that you can walk to the place that you are interested in. And because it just keeps happening every other month for 12 years. So anyone with an initial idea know that if you just go to the next bi-monthly hackathon, you can find some of the compatriots to your next project. And even if the project fizzles out, most projects fizzle out, it doesn't matter because it's open source, it's in Creative Commons, it becomes material for the next projects, right? So to have this co-production site is very, very important, and just to hold it recurringly, that is very important. And the other thing that is important is, again, a diversity of perspectives. The GovZero hackathons are very known for having very good gender parity of engineers not dominating more than 50%. I think they started at 35–40%, but now it's even less. It's 20% or something, mostly because of the fact that you can ask Anthropic or other advanced AI system to code up any front-end application you want now, so you don't need that many coders. But there's civil society movement people, there's journalists, storytellers, filmmakers, designers, many different kind of people. So the point is that if you start the recurring meeting with a diverse enough set of people that has this internal coherence of people being very comfortable that their discipline doesn't dominate the conversation. It's a little bit like the public digital innovation space, where each ministry only have one person, so no one single perspective can dominate the conversation. Then you actually get into the place where people feel comfortable introducing their friends of unrelated disciplines into such conversations. And it's usually those unrelated disciplines that have the most contribution, the most insight into how to make these projects into something that's truly popular, instead of just a cool demo between one engineer and one designer, right? So everybody is an expert in their lived experience, and the more different fields, the more interdisciplinary your hackathons are, the better it is. So in the presidential hackathon, we noticed that even though the ideas are very diverse, in terms of age, it's not very diverse. There's maybe one 15-year-old, one 16-year-old, but usually the even younger people don't participate on the level of presidential hackathon. So we even created new event called Ideathon that doesn't need implementation at all. You just need to tell a very good story, and so that 10 years old, 11-year-old can feel very comfortable in participating. So you can always be more inclusive. There's no end to inclusivity.
Thank you very much for all of the questions, and obviously a big thank you to Audrey Tang for being here. Big round of applause. There's a small gift for you. I think it's from, especially from Switzerland. I also do want to thank all our partners. That's the Allianz Digital Republik, also the Kurz ETH Zurich, and the Bitwäscherei for hosting us here in this beautiful hacker place. Now we have a little apero for you over there. That's the Swiss way of doing it, with a small apero-ish in that case. The sandwiches and some drinks. Feel free to stay here and have a good time also. Thank you very much for being here, and yes, have a good evening. Thank you.